Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the CAP and PAA Town Hall for May 27th, 2021. I'm Dr. Troy Jansen, and I'll be your moderator for tonight, or for today. I'd like to introduce Dr. Judi Malone, the CEO for the Psychologists Association of Alberta. She's been a long-standing practitioner in Alberta, and I believe you're already also licensed in Australia, as my understanding. So. We also have Dr. Richard Spelliscy, who is CEO and Registrar for the College of Alberta Psychologists, and Richard, too, has been a long-standing practitioner. My role as moderator will be to check in and monitor any comments anyone wishes to add in. You'll have to log into your Google account in the YouTube to be able to add comments and or questions. So if you're not sure how to do that, you can also email us at psych@cap.ab.ca, and we have someone monitoring that email in case you'd wish to email us a question that you'd like us to address in the town hall today. So without further ado, I'm going to first ask Dr. Spelliscy to begin with a land acknowledgement, and after that, Dr. Malone will start with an address from PAA.
Good afternoon. I'd like to begin with this land acknowledgement. With respect and in the spirit of reconciliation and truth, we honor and acknowledge that we are here in Alberta under Treaties 4, 6, 7, and 8, as well as many unsigned treaties, and are on the traditional and ancestral territory of many diverse Indigenous populations, namely the Blackfoot, including the Kainai, Piikani, Siksika, the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina Nations, and the Métis people of Alberta. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have lived on and cared for these lands for generations, and the many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. We are dedicated to ensuring the spirit of all treaties are honored and respected by committing to interpret legislation, regulations, and policies with an Indigenous lens when serving their communities. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting.
Thank you, Richard. That's excellent. And you know what? I'm really proud of us in psychology that we're really very active on not just the land acknowledgements, but really trying to do more of an honest deep dive into truth and reconciliation, which we'll talk about a bit later. Those are shared projects with the College and the Psychologists Association of Alberta. I know doing a land acknowledgement at the beginning isn't sufficient. It's not that it's the be all and end all or is resolving anything, but it's a really important symbolic gesture that I think really begins to shape and reinforce our views and our commitments. So thank you for doing that, Richard. Troy, you're good if I start?
That's great, thank you. So, I'll turn it back to you, Judi, and see. I understand you have a bit of a presentation, a brief presentation. So we'll let you start with that. So looking forward to that.
Super, thanks so much. So again, we welcome all of you who are joining us either live or reviewing this afterwards. We really do appreciate these opportunities to be in touch and get to know people in various jurisdictions across the province, and this is our province-wide town hall. So we really appreciate this as an opportunity to share what we're doing and hear from you, answer your questions, find out what practice is like. And this is really that sort of province-wide litmus test and sharing. A lot has happened since we did this first province-wide post-pandemic town hall a year ago. So it's a great opportunity for that kind of follow-up. Next stage. All right, sorry, I'm just going to move my session along. Okay, and we'll start with the video. The little caveat for this is, of course, that this is our summary from last year. So we've done an entire year worth of work since then. And that's what my presentation will be a little bit, is catching us up on the last year of practice. But we start with where we were at last year this time. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to end that prematurely. Last time I promise. Super, I'm getting better at those glitches, but I thank you all for the patience. One thing that I've heard is that this pandemic, if nothing else, has been an accelerator of technology use and has also given us all that patience to learn what we know and we don't know and to develop new skills at a very rapid rate. So as many of you know, we're the advocacy arm of our profession here in Alberta, just dedicated to the psychological health and wellness of all Albertans through the promotion of the profession as a science-based profession. Health practitioners that are really dedicated to the use and to learning from both science and practice in our field. That makes us really leaders in health. We do a lot of public education and advocacy work. Everything is really grounded into our core values. We operate with a good strategic plan. We set yearly goals. We have an amazing set of volunteers who are your board of directors, the chairs of committees and task forces, but it all comes back down to the heart of what our values are, which are that psychology is leadership, promoting collaboration, that we value psychological health and inclusion. And we use that to clarify and communicate all of our messages and determine every next step that we take. As I mentioned, we're pretty active in advocacy, and that goes both ways. I do a lot of advocacy. We have members that do amazing advocacy and really are just such experts that we can draw on depending on what we're doing. I have an example here of a letter that was sent jointly from our two organizations in January regarding access and really specifically highlighting those issues that have arisen because of the pandemic. But this is a really ongoing process. 3 days ago was our latest formal letter supporting the College of Psychologists in New Brunswick, where there's been legislation to change who can deliver really what are cognitive and psychological tests. And the psychology community across the country has really rallied behind New Brunswick and the implications for all of us. So advocacy is really ongoing and is meant to both protect the public and for safety in our profession, but also to really advance psychological health and wellness of all Albertans. Part of that that's really core for us and helps us to best understand our core values are our public position statements. And we have many of those. So this is one of the ones that people have the right to work in psychologically healthy workplaces. One of our pandemic presentations that we have for the public, volunteers deliver these, they're free for the public, is specific to psychologically healthy workplaces during a pandemic. So it's really something we continue to promote depending on the situation in the province. And of course, access, access, access. People might interpret that as meaning one thing, Alberta healthcare coverage or more funded positions, but really there are many different ways to increase access. What's most important is that psychologists are some of the most trained and skilled regulated health professionals when we look at psychological or mental health. So we need to be accessible to the most vulnerable Albertans and those who really could most benefit from our services. When you see some of those clips from our social media or on our YouTube site, and we're asking where you stand, we are asking you to reply to us on social media, tell us about where you stand on those issues, because they are important to engage all Albertans and all members. School psychology, we talk about developmentally the best periods in which to have intervention and ensure a solid foundation remains a very essential cornerstone for us here in Alberta. Days away from Pride Month launching, I think this one has been more important in the last year, or has certainly been much more on our radar in the last year. And this is an opportunity for psychology to take a stand, to demonstrate our leadership, both in promoting diversity, taking a stand and action to decrease racism and discrimination, but also to ourselves rise to the call and really question how we move forward to really enhance what we can do as a profession and as individuals. We stay behind our very clear public position statement that if you're working with vulnerable people, if you're providing psychotherapy, mental health counseling for the most vulnerable, you should have at least a master's degree in psychology, counseling, etc. And we'll see the regulations are not out and developed yet for the College of Counselors, but we are going to be seeing changes on the horizon. We just want to be very, very clear on the needs and basic requirements for the most vulnerable of all Albertans. And of course, one fundamental way to increase access is Alberta healthcare insurance coverage. Pros and cons, there's lots of debates about that. But as time goes on, we see clearer and clearer models in Quebec, in Australia, in the UK, where psychological health is seen as a core aspect of health and is funded as a core aspect of health with considerable long-term benefits for the population. And we work in many settings. We could have many titles, generic mental health therapist, behavioral consultant, etc. But if you are a psychologist, it's very important to be able to use that title, registered psychologist, and others who may have the same generic title as you, say behavioral consultant, also need to identify what kind of professional they are, so that the public is more and more informed about the services they're receiving and who's providing those services. If we had funding on Parity, that pretty much would solve the access issues, regardless of how those access issues were addressed. We don't fund mental or psychological health on parity to physical health. And that's not parity for equity. It's parity based on the burden of disease. There's great research for that. We like to stay in touch. We want to keep you informed. We want to make sure you have reliable information, easily accessible at your fingertips. Of course, there's the e-news that you all receive. We also have Collaborate, which is our new way of ensuring we've got a Facebook type platform that's completely secure and is only for members. So there's that ability to share resources, ask good questions, do discussion. We're really excited that, this is only launched for 6 months. It's starting to really pick up. And we have a great plan this summer to sort of retool those communities and Collaborate to make sure we're maximizing benefit to members now that we see communication needs for individuals. We're also, as you know, very active on social media. We now have Instagram. So if you don't subscribe to us on Instagram, please do check that out. We continue to use YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. This is our latest addition to the infographic, a really useful brief infographic on children and the pandemic summer, some great parenting tips and strategies, really our way of giving psychology away through that public education. And we've got some amazing public education volunteers.
Hi, my name is Kyle Poon, and I'm a registered psychologist in Edmonton, Alberta. I currently work both in person as well as online through video or phone therapy, also known as telepsychology. I specialize in trauma treatment, for example, supporting those suffering from PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. I often work with first responders, military, RCMP, veterans, correctional officers, First Nations and Indigenous peoples, survivors of domestic and sexual trauma, as well as childhood trauma, and the LGBTQ2S+ community. I became interested in psychology for a few different reasons, both personally and professionally. Personally, my father was a first responder with over 25 years of work in the field, and much of his journey has both taught and inspired me in helping serve those who put their lives on the line every day. Professionally, I used to work as a support worker, where I've had the privilege of working with families who were experiencing and had experienced trauma. Through this work, I was inspired to get more training and experience so that I could really help families and individuals journey through their own healing processes, healing wounds that trauma can leave. I value psychology because I believe psychology is about inspiring us to look inwards at the resilience that we hold and to overcome hurt we may be experiencing and the hurt we may be placing outwards. I believe everyone is resilient in their own way, and psychology is one of the many ways that we can help each other tap into our natural resilience. Thank you.
So it's one of many fantastic videos that some of the volunteers in our public education committee did, but it's also a call out if you want to make a short video like this. And we keep them on our YouTube channel. We use them in great settings. They also work well for career development for our student members or people who may be considering the profession. But they're really beautiful, very personalized way of sharing what psychology is. And that those video series, which I do encourage you to go check out, kicked off this February for Psychology Month. Of course, you know, we have many events and webinars. If you haven't checked out that list, check it out again. We do, of course, co-sponsor and collaborate when we think there's something of particular benefit for our members, but we have range and we've adapted by really increasing that range during the pandemic. A lot of 1 hour primers, maybe you want a short overview on a topic to see if you want more training information in that area. We have the set of 4 recordings that are free for members. You can register as a member and you get access to that recording for free. And they're really about pandemic practice. We want to help. And then there's a list, they're not even all shown there, of longer webinars that you can register in and watch at your own pace. And just some excellent, excellent resources like how do you start and operate a private practice in psychology, the weight-related issues, they're all really, really excellent. One of my recent personal favorites is what about emotional support dogs? When and how do you prescribe those? So just some excellent resources from Alberta experts. The referral service in that last year's update that you saw how we got up to 37 referrals a day. Well, it's been over 80 for a while. And we know that waxes and wanes with the weather and the seasons. Part of that is really due to the pandemic. Some of it is also about being a trusted source, one place to go to where you know you're going to find a psychologist, not a counselor or a therapist of some kind who may be advertising on a psychology related service. And we're really looking forward to some plans to take that referral service online to the next level over the next few months. We also target issues that matter. There are so many things we could do all the time, so we're always prioritizing and setting what those are. We've continued to do work. This is a joint task force, so Richard may mention it as well, on truth and reconciliation. It's an excellent group. I am so proud of what's happened here in Alberta, and many of the great things come directly from the college's engagement, and I'll leave that for Richard, but I will say the work has been, and we have barely begun this work, has been so profound that in a couple of weeks we're going to be presenting at the National Congress on, conference on what Alberta is doing. as an exemplar and an encouragement to other provinces and jurisdictions to get far more involved in truth and reconciliation as a profession. We also have our new task force on racism in Alberta psychology, an amazing group that has got around to that point where they've really set the foundation and are ready to go to work. Just an amazing, amazing group of our peers who is really leading and looking at change in this area. And the mentorship task force was also launched this year. It's been a very big year, but we're really starting to target how do we work through that career pathway and ensure you have the support you need at various stages in your professional development. Of course, nothing that we do, we do without volunteers, and we have a pretty robust list. We're really excited that this summer we're going to be launching a plan to move into communities of practice and engage far more people who are interested in some of these areas beyond just what our standing committees have been. But this core group has just been really your leaders and remarkable leaders, giving their time and efforts to shape and be involved and engaged for our profession. We have fantastic research that's being done on a regular basis. We have a master's intern right now who's doing a program evaluation for us. It's just one of many examples, but we make these available for you. People have questions about technology practice. We can't just answer them. Some of these things are evolving quickly, but we have the most amazing technology first task force, then committee, and again, task force that's been looking at what our members do, what our members need, what do we really need to consider when selecting and using technology, and that is just such a tremendous asset to our membership. Now you're actually seeing that video before it launches because it's going to be for next year. For this year, we had a record number of nominations, and I want to personally thank every PAA member who took the time to think about their peers, to nominate, to accept a nomination. This is really the year to celebrate the leaders and the future leaders that we have. We're really excited for September when we will be having a live, pivot if needed, Welcome to the Profession banquet and our awards ceremony. And it's just an excellent, excellent lineup this year. And that's a teaser again for next year. Sorry. So again, for those of you, if you're not members, here are the key benefits. They're kind of hard to capture and just put in a slide, but we are always expanding this range to make sure that membership, which means many things to many people, meets your needs and what is most important to you. The more members that we have as a group, and we peaked at 3,300 this year, which is extremely impressive, the more collaborative power that gives us, the more networking and collaboration, the stronger voice in advocacy, and the most impact in public education. So this is my last bit before I turn it over to Richard. Super. So we thank all valued members. We thank every psychologist, student, provisionally registered psychologist in this province for what you're doing during a very trying year and time, and for rising to the call of leadership. Turn it over to Richard, just pointing out that that little video clip at the very end was us in this town hall November last year. And so much has really changed since then. So thank you. After we speak, and in the chat box, please keep thinking about these things. Please share with us, what is life in practice like for you right now? What are you particularly proud of, or you notice? What are your struggles or concerns or questions that you have for us? And Troy will moderate those. Thank you.
Thank you, Judi. So let's turn it over to Richard. Richard, he's got it queuing up his slides, and I'll turn it over to him. Just so you know, Richard, you're still on mute. You need to unmute yourself. While Richard's getting his microphone on, I just want to remind everybody that there's opportunity to add questions or comments in the chat feature. And so we welcome any comments or questions in the chat feature. As Judi mentioned, it's been a long year, and we certainly value the work of PAA. And you know, I speak from the college that we always encourage our members to also belong to PAA, to be involved in the profession, because we all can be leaders as psychologists. So I really appreciate your words, Judi, in that regard. Richard, are you ready to go?
Yes, Troy, sorry about that. We just had a little bit of a technical difficulty with that last thing, but we're ready to go. So as Judi ended with a thank you, I'd like to begin with a thank you. And that's to the dedicated service of both provisionally and registered psychologists during a year which presented both personal and professional challenges. This includes an acknowledgement of how most regulated members were able to quickly pivot to virtual services and adapt to the public health orders. I know many regulated members were redeployed to frontline positions, including emergency departments, supporting the public, and our collaborative healthcare partners. Finally, what I'd like to do is acknowledge college council, staff, and volunteers who demonstrated a strong commitment to both the public and profession throughout this past year. The college leveraged existing technology and established private virtual networks for secure remote access and communications with all staff. We also revised bylaws and streamlined administrative processes, allowing the college to adapt and fulfill our core public protection functions, including registration, management of professional conduct concerns, and complaints. I'm exceedingly grateful for the support I received from college staff and council. Truly, they have placed the mental health interests of Albertans above all else. On a final note, I'd like to thank Judi Malone and PAA staff for their fine work they are doing in response to the pandemic. The PAA, like their fraternal cousins at the CPA and APA, have done a fantastic job responding to the pandemic. Like CAP, all three of the organizations have dedicated COVID-19 web pages and a wealth of professional resources. We can truly be proud of our profession and our associations. The supports offered to both the public and our respective members have been a tremendous assistance to everyone. The college is committed to both public and regulated members' transparency. This is demonstrated in several ways, including posting the dates of our council meetings on the college website, publication of our annual report, and the CAP monitor, town hall meetings such as this, and other public meetings and membership surveys. The college has a Contact Us webpage where both the public and regulated member questions are received. Please feel free to utilize this site anytime, or you can contact me directly. I'd like to begin by a year in review. A core function of the college is to establish entry to practice requirements for the profession. This includes establishing the minimum entry to practice academic criteria and examinations required to enter the profession. Many of you may know that the college has been modernizing our registration process by implementing the registration review recommendations, and this committee was chaired by Dr. Derek Truscott and working directly with all the graduate programs in Alberta. This is to increase the certainty of graduates from psychology programs in Alberta that indeed they'll meet our registration requirements and will not have to undergo a course-by-course analysis of their academic credentials once their director of training has confirmed the proposed program meets our academic criteria. This process, employed for graduates of Canadian and American Psychological Association accredited programs, parallels their ability to enter the profession without a delay. Dr. Lori Rossi, chair of this university program approval committee, along with Drs. Blaschko, Dice, Wallace, and Hawkins, willingly volunteered many Saturdays to get this program underway. This table identifies those programs which have been approved by the college under our UPAC program. As you can see, once the final program is approved, all 10 programs within Alberta will be recognized under this program, streamlining the admissions process to the college, where they will be able to bypass, as I mentioned earlier, that course-by-course analysis. This table outlines the number of credential applicants by fiscal year. You can see that we are having a steady progression of applicants for their credentials review. And you can see approximately 1/3 of those individuals were from Alberta institutions. Of that 315, another third were from other Canadian institutions, and a relatively similar proportion were from institutions outside of Canada, primarily the United States. Erica Pang is our credentials coordinator, and she has done an exceptional job throughout the pandemic. And also a special thanks to Dr. Ali Al-Assadi, who is our credentials chair and who was on my speed dial while we attempted to process those applications throughout the year without a committee. So I thank you very much to both Ali and the committee, as well as Erica, and hopefully we can soon get back to where that committee is meeting either by Zoom or in person during the upcoming fiscal year. The next table outlines, oh, I'm just going to hit that again, outlines the number of registration applications by fiscal year. And you can see again, we have a steady progression. Typically, we're increasing our registration applications by approximately 4 to 5% a year, and this is 4%. And I noticed when Judi was doing her presentation that PAA increased their registrants by 8%. So that's really impressive, because while we're increasing 4%, they're doubling that 4% to 8%. So congratulations to Judi and her colleagues at PAA for people seeing the value of belonging to PAA. And I think Judi would correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as provincial associations go across Canada, I think PAA has the highest rate of participation than any other association. And I think because they're not a mandatory organization, PAA members see the utility of belonging to the PAA. So once again, congratulations, Judi. In terms of our total regulated members by fiscal year, you can see our membership now is over 4,000. And so we are a large group of professionals. And as Judi maintained in her presentation, I believe we are one of the best trained mental health professions in Alberta. I'd like to talk to you briefly about our professional guidance department. And of course, they've been exceptionally busy with COVID. You can see the exponential increase in professional guidance inquiries. Approximately half of those inquiries were due to the COVID increase in COVID complaints, inquiries rather, and another significant portion of that growth was related to cross-jurisdictional practices, as individuals wanted to understand how to support clients who were transitioning to another province during the pandemic. This table outlines the number of professional, I've done the guidance inquiries. Table 7 looks at the professional conduct department complaints. And what you can see there, like professional guidance, the complaints has increased exponentially this year, and almost a doubling of the increase from previous years. And again, we think that that there are reasons behind this, and we have taken into reflecting on what may be a driver of this increase. One of the drivers, we believe, is that with Bill 21 being implemented, our complaints reporting form must be displayed on our website so that people can make an online complaint. Previously, what we did is we had them contact the complaints department to see the specific nature of their complaint, and if there were alternative ways of intervening that were appropriate. Now, not all complaints are appropriate for resolution, but we believe that a substantial number of complaints can be resolved if both participants are willing to work together for a mutually agreeable resolution. The next table outlines an important commitment that I had to the profession when entering the registrar's role, is to look at our continuing competence requirements, which has been one of our challenges over the years to implement our continuing competence program because our regulations have not been passed. The college took an alternative approach last year by developing a continuing competence standard of practice to replace our regulations. While it's not the ideal approach, it was based upon what we believe our suggestion spurred the government to also do that for other professions, given their difficulties passing regulations. What we've decided to do in our program will be what we consider an elegant as well as a holistic program. Elegant in that our program will have 3 basic steps. And that will be to describe what your practice is in a self-reflection statement, design a continuing competence plan. What skills would you like to acquire, develop, or maintain? And then document what you wish to accomplish in your CCP programs and what you did accomplish in your CC program. With another development with the college, we are going to have the technology so that you can upload your continuing competence program from your cell phone or from your laptop or desktop computer and document those areas for our mandatory audit purposes. When we look at our program, when we call it holistic, these are the 4 quadrants that we're looking at for our continuing competence program. And we think that this holistic approach looks at the whole psychologist. So for example, when we look at what are factors that impact a person's risk or professional's risk to the public, we know that they must be engaged in the profession. Individuals must take an active participation. So our members will be given credit and recognition for those activities that are engaging in the profession. Those could be volunteering for a CAP or PAA committee. They could be writing articles for either organizations. They could be taking a mentorship role or a supervision role in the profession. All of those we would consider professional engagement activities. The next important quadrant is scientifically supported professional knowledge and practice. We know our professional knowledge has a shelf life, and we know that evidence-based practices are emerging all the time, and it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that we're abreast of those current changes. So that would include everything from taking courses, taking CCP webinars, doing research, teaching special workshops. Those kinds of things will all be given recognition. A third quadrant, which will be part of our program, is the ethics and jurisprudence knowledge and practice. Like our scientific knowledge, our ethical requirements are constantly evolving and changing, and it is incumbent upon all psychologists to remain current in ethical practices. So we will be giving acknowledgement and credit in our program for individuals who review articles written by, in the CAP Monitor, or who undertake special training in ethics. So all of those areas will be given recognition for that. Serving as an expert for the college, those kinds of things that require further study and investigation will be given credit. The final quadrant is wellness, and we will be giving credit for and require psychologists to develop a wellness plan, review it every year, set some goals, and that will be part of your commitment to the profession, as well as to role model healthy living and psychological wellness. So those are the four core categories of the Continuing Competence Program, which we hope to introduce in February of the upcoming registration year. And that will coincide with the implementation of our new member management system, which will allow members to interact with their college profile, looking for messages, looking for updated registration requirements, and the like. And we hope that members will see the college as a source of information and feel comfortable using the technology to leverage our new member management system. Overall, our mandate is to serve and protect the interests of the public and to guide the profession. Our college staff supporting this include everyone from Crystal Wilms, our reception, Kathy Semchuk, my executive coordinator, Lindsay Bowers, our director of privacy and information, and Wendy Alyssa, our director of finance and administration. We are very fortunate to have a smart staff and a smart council who really recognize what our challenges are. And there are many challenges in the profession. We are constantly engaged with Alberta Health to ensure that we are an essential service. Many of you will remember that we had to engage with the government to clarify that psychologists were an essential service. Psychologists did step up and demonstrated that they were important. And this was reflected in my mind when the government was looking for health professions who could evaluate whether a person could, whether there was a reason where a person couldn't wear a mask. The government turned to psychologists and specifically included in that public health order to say that psychologists do have a value in ensuring that public health orders are respected, both in terms of their spirit and not just their wording. Again, with the member management system, we are continually evolving technologically. We see that our future is bright. In November, our council will be meeting to establish a new 5-year strategic plan to modernization the college even further, and to look at how can psychology grow and leverage the important role it demonstrated during the pandemic and help us in the post-pandemic environment to meet the ever-increasing needs, mental health needs of Albertans. So we are very excited about the future of the college. We're excited about implementing the Continuing Competence Program. We're thrilled about our new member management system, and we're thrilled about the direction the college is heading to looking at such important issues as supervision in the upcoming fiscal year, as well as looking at how we can work more closely with academic institutions to ensure that psychologists are being graduated from our professional programs with the essential knowledge they need for professional practice. And again, we think that, and possibly one maybe adverse or unintended consequence was the government's increase of academic fees at institutions for professional psychology programs, but they are aligning them with other professional programs such as lawyers, engineers, and medical students, suggesting that the government does see the value in psychology, which both Judi and I continue to promote. So those are my comments, and thank you very much. And I think Judi and I are both open to questions, either through the chat or through YouTube.
Thanks very much, both Dr. Spelliscy and Dr. Malone. And we haven't had a ton of questions reflected at this point in time on the comments, although we did have one question that I'll put to you, Judi, is more regarding, to say a little bit more regarding the role of educating the public on advocacy around the profession. And I think that advocacy is clearly a PAA role for the profession. And so one of the commentaries was about how well certain groups, such as life coaches, for example, have done at advertising about themselves and making the public aware of that. And so the question is, what can we do as a profession to sort of advocate for the benefits of the psychologists and their training, and how have those advocacy efforts with, say, government gone? So I'll put that to you to start.
That's very timely, actually, Troy, and a really, really good question to bring forward for lots of reasons. Major research we've been involved in nationally and provincially since 2011 says when you poll the public, who do you want to see? They want to see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or their physician with major issues. The public actually knows who they want, and maybe that's why other groups have to do even more advertising. But also, as psychologists, we're leaders, but we're kind of humble leaders, and psychologists aren't great about bragging. We have very honorable and clear professional ethics and boundaries. We don't make practices we can't keep. We don't advertise to be something that we're not, so we're not going to look splashy in that surface kind of way. What we really want to do, particularly with the regulation of counselors, and there will always be more and more players in the field, is not highlighting what other groups don't do as well as us, but really identifying how we are unique, because we are. It is not easy to become a psychologist. It's very rigorous. Our standards, our principles are something else. We have overlapping scopes of practice with psychiatrists, with counselors, with many groups, but we can easily differentiate ourselves with that level of training and expertise that we do have. And so rather than sort of jostling for our position in the market, we need to just get a lot more clear and ensure the public is and remains more clear on the value of a psychologist. Decision makers usually know this when I meet with them, when others meet with them, but they sometimes will look at short-term gain, what's cheaper, what's easier to do, what looks good on the surface. We're about results, evidence-based practice, outcome-informed practice, demonstrating the benefit of psychology. And so insurance companies, workers' compensation board, people who know how to run actuarials, they're even more clear than the public on the value of a psychologist. So it's taking pride in that, and maybe all of us taking that responsibility to have a bit more of a role in promoting what differentiates psychology and psychologists. There's never enough mental health services, period. We just want those who need and deserve access to a psychologist to have that and to know what that difference is. Hope that answers it. Richard, maybe you want to add something to that.
Thanks, Judi. Well, I think I really agree with you, Judi. And I think that one of the things that I've known in the last few years is psychologists really are coming into their own. They're much more confident of who we are, what we do, and how we're different. And I think that we need to translate to those who we come encounter. Well, what's the difference between a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, and a psychologist? And I think that's really important. And I think that we can, like you say, turn to our standards, turn to our rigorous examinations, turn to our training, and to turn to our focus on evidence-based practice. And as scientists, practitioners, we are leaders in informed psychology, informed practice, and we can demonstrate our effectiveness and value. And I think that's how we stand out. And while it's true that Judi notes that there are other individuals in the field who practice, I think that we must emphasize who we are, what our skills are, how we're different, and simply be proud of who we are, and how all those features or characteristics, such as the high training, the examinations, the standards, the ethics, all protect the public and provide that service. And I can, say I get many calls, and even today, someone calling me about, well, they're not a psychologist, but I want to tell you the issue. And so we try and help them say, well, what are your options? Because they're not a psychologist, the college has no authority over them. We can't hold them accountable for what they're calling about and those kinds of things. So we tell them, we say, call the government, call the ombudsman's office, call the university who was training this person. Those are their options, but unfortunately, they don't have always a regulatory body who they can turn to ensure that what services they are provided are safe and effective.
Oh, and if Troy lets me sneak in one little thing there, a public education committee that made some of those videos about why I became a psychologist, they're also currently working on some information communications on how do you access a psychologist and what does it cost? Because you can access through a public system, NGOs, et cetera, but the majority are in private practice. Do you have coverage or not? What does it cost to access? And as psychologists, that's something we can sometimes be shy of because we have these systemic issues where there isn't sufficient funding for psychology. We can, I suppose, sometimes responsibility for that. Instead, we want to work on that, and we want the public to be much more aware of how they can access and what the barriers are. That's okay. The public are fantastic advocates with us, and it's just clear information so that if they are making a choice, say with out-of-pocket fees to pay or their insurance company, they really know the pros and cons, because we want the public to be making those informed choices.
Excellent. Thank you both for weighing in on that. Now, we have about, I think, 8 minutes left. I believe we've set an hour aside for this town hall. There aren't a whole lot of additional questions, but I do think that one of the questions I anticipated but didn't see is it's been a long year from the perspective of we've just gone over a 1-year anniversary of a declaration of a global pandemic, and we had some good news recently in the news, and I wonder if there might be questions out there about what this means for the transitioning psychological services, possibly back to office as soon as summer. And I'm going to ask Richard to begin on this, and maybe Judi has some advice for those transitions as we think forward to a possible relief from some of the restrictions that we've been under in the public health orders.
Well, thank you, Troy. And that's a good question. As you know, there was a press conference by the government announcing the 3-phase plan to reopen the province, and ideally by the end of July. So for those of you who missed that, you can check the Alberta Health Services website to look at the 3 phases. What it means for psychologists is that it's not until phase 3 where those public health order restrictions are being lifted. So in that graduated first 2 phases, those many of the public health order requirements, such as masking, social distancing, continue to be relevant. And psychologists are going to be needing to exercise their good professional judgment when seeing clients in their offices again, and under what precautions. So, and I also think it would be prudent for psychologists to look, well, we may need to back up. It may not go as planned. So, we encourage them to have a plan B, so that if they do go back, that they still have their access to virtual services, so that if the pandemic does not abate like we're hoping it will, that they can still continue to practice and meet the mental health needs of Albertans in a safe fashion. But it's not until phase 3 that those public health order conditions are lifted. So it's important that psychologists continue to be fluent in those public health orders, or to call the college or PAA and look at either's websites for up-to-date information. But we're very pleased by the response that psychologists have made to those public health orders, and that we feel that our profession has been role model-like in abiding by those orders. And again, as my initial remarks, that the government really had turned to us with the issue of providing a medical note for those who can't wear masks. And I think that this will be a sign of the future to come, in my mind, as psychologists respond to post-pandemic mental health needs, that they'll continue to turn to psychology and psychologists despite the new professions on the block. I do think that we are, like Judi mentioned, and research bears this out, a very trusted professional with respect to mental health. And that when people are speaking about mental health, they are speaking about psychologists. So I think that's really important. That says a lot about our profession in general, as well as our regulation of our profession, that people see us as skilled, knowledgeable, but also that see it as a safe service. So we're really happy about that, and we think that the future, like I said, is bright for both the regulatory aspect of psychology as well as the profession as a whole.
I actually want to add a little story that I got last week in meetings with my American colleagues. All of us in North America get together, and they were talking about what happened with the CDC's announcement in the US, the Center for Disease Control, saying if you receive both vaccines, you don't actually have to follow some of the mask mandates. And things changed instantly. They lurched for these changes, and then states, municipalities, districts, and organizations panicked and said, absolutely not, and read the fine print. And one of the things the CDC said very clearly, that doesn't apply to healthcare settings, and it doesn't apply to healthcare professionals, even if you're fully vaccinated and your patients have been fully vaccinated. But people are really wanting and needing change. So we get to learn lessons from neighbors who might go through things before we do. And as leaders, we actually have more responsibility in health and in service provision than some of our colleagues might. Also have more benefits. Just look at a few colleagues like dentists, and what has this last year been like for them? You don't do teledentistry except in very, very limited cases. Dermatologists could provide very few services at a distance. We can't do everything, and we have a wide variety of practice and teaching and research and academia. But there are a lot of things about psychology that can be done through telepsychology. I hear from members over and over a lot of surprises. I've had surprises myself. Some things work better. Some things, wow, we're increasing access for numbers or people who really had travel, transportation, childcare, other kinds of issues, seeing people in their real setting. Is it perfect? No. Does it create more barriers? In some ways it does, but there are also learnings from this. So I don't think for our profession and for our members in this province, it will be us lurching from in-person to telepsychology back to in-person. I think we're going to find where that middle ground is, and we're going to do it slowly and carefully, also because there are just so many ramifications for the people that we work to serve and for our staff and ourselves, that we have that ability, unlike some professions, to tiptoe and ensure we're doing a really safe transition back into in-person when we do.
Yeah, I agree, Judi. I really think that many psychologists will have a hybrid model of telehealth and in-person services. And I also think that you're quite correct that even though there will be a lessening of some restrictions, some clients will appreciate when there are voluntary restrictions put in place, when the practitioner continues to maybe do a modified screening, or when they have an office environment that provides for some social distancing, or when the waiting room takes into consideration of not having too many people in a small waiting room. All those kinds of things, I think the public will appreciate when a health professional does that, knowing that they're doing that with their interests in mind. And I'm talking about the public's interest in mind. So I think that even though there may not be a rule in place, that many practitioners will continue to do those good health risk mitigation strategies that demonstrate to the public that our primary goal is to do no harm, that we have their interests at heart. And so I think that our profession will demonstrate a lot of good, sound judgment.
Excellent. Thank you both for weighing in on that. And we have a few minutes, I think, if you don't mind. There were a couple of key questions that just popped up. Richard, I think, did mention about the continuing professional development, continuing competence program, rather, that'll be implemented this year. And there was a question about when that will be implemented. I believe Richard mentioned that would be hoped for by February. Is that correct, Richard?
Yes, during the registration year. And again, so we will do a substantial amount of engagement, and we'll give people lots of information prior to that. But what we'll be seeking is in February, when you register, that you will be doing your self-reflection practice as well as your plan for the upcoming year. And then from there, you will be, the following year, you'll be reporting on how you did in relation to your plan, and then the cycle will continue. And what we're hoping to do is have as I mentioned before, an elegant, straightforward program that will be administratively easy for the psychologist. And what I mean by that is that it will be online, that you will be able to put your information in, the requirements that we want you to do for demonstrating that you participated in your plan will be submitted online. So there'll be no need to track information other than the information that you submit, except for your wellness plan. And in that, we are not going to have you track your wellness plan in general, but our goal will be that you will develop and reflect on a wellness plan each year to encourage you to maintain good self-care. So that program will be coming with lots of communication in advance, town hall meetings. I'm sure some of those will be joint with PAA, because I believe that PAA will take a major role in their CPD programming. So there'll be lots of sharing between organizations, with PAA with their mandate of providing continuing education, and with the college in setting expectations. So I think it'll be a very positive year, and we can look at, once our program and the digital platform is finalized, we'll be rolling out our communication plan to the members well in advance. But again, the focus for 2022 will be developing that plan, that self-reflection plan, and throughout that year, people will be documenting, or regulated members will be documenting their working towards those goals in that plan.
Excellent. One other question, and I'll target this to Judi first, was there were those that wanted to understand what your experience is collectively, both Judi and Richard, in terms of trying to get the government ear on any issues that we're trying to raise at any given time. And there's a bit of a worry that, are you just being ignored? And I think that you could probably speak to that in terms of what your experience has been in trying to talk to anybody in the government on issues relevant to psychologists.
Yeah, and you know, it's never that nice, neat kind of puzzle, because it's not just going to the legislature to meet with individuals. When we're working with primary care physicians, pain clinics, women's health leadership, always making sure psychology is there, those all become our advocates as well, large institutions, insurance companies, et cetera. So we make sure we spread that advocacy across. Of course, major legislation and policies are provincial. Every government is different in its responsiveness. And so if I sort of balance that, the current government, who has been dealing with the pandemic, also has not been particularly responsive, least responsive in my entire history in Alberta doing advocacy, as far as getting back and open communication. Now they have a couple of things on their plate. On the other hand, we have seen more movement towards access than ever before by individual MLAs, city councillors, public access groups, other advocacy groups, you know, parent groups or others, saying, hey, how can we work with you? We want to support this, or we have groups come to us and say, we want to promote Alberta healthcare coverage for psychologists. And that's a very, very powerful voice to make those very important relationships. Because if you think of it from a government's perspective, it can look sometimes like everybody comes with their hand out and says, my profession, my organization, my practices are the most important. Now, also sort of one of those larger contexts with the particular government's plan has been pretty clearly no new money and cutbacks. And so that's not an environment conducive to creative solutions. So we just keep asking and sharing and building relationships with that multitude of voices. In my experience, what has become our loudest and probably our most solid advocacy group and partners have been physicians. they want to be able to easily access. They don't care if it's psychologists in the healthcare system, in primary care, in private practice. They don't care. They want access to psychologists. And that really speaks also to our level of practice. So we work every single angle. And when one seems a little quieter and less responsive, we do those other angles more, and things will come together more over time. It's just, it's one of those 3 steps forward, 2 or 3 back, and we just keep doing it.
Yeah, and I'd like to just echo what Judi said again, in that what we do is when there's a change of players, and there have been many different changes, both at the government and the Ministry of Health, as well as other organizations, what we do is we always touch base with the new people, tell them what psychologists are, what they do. Judi and I often, as she mentioned in her slide presentation, author joint letters saying this is the unique value of psychologists. The Deputy Minister of Health just changed in the last couple of weeks. So I'm in the middle of writing a letter similar introducing the college, what we do, what the needs of Albertans are, and not to ask a specific issue. We are suggesting that our regulations, which we believe require updating, and we have had them into the government for many, many years, we're asking to have those possibly addressed as soon as possible, just so that they don't sit on the back burner. It's one of those issues of walking that fine line by being too pushy or not pushy enough, and we're trying to negotiate that and navigate that, knowing that the government has been exceptionally busy. We participate in all meetings. I was in a meeting with Dr. Hinshaw this week talking about the new restrictions being lifted. And so anytime there's an opportunity for us to participate, we're there. We want them to know that we're reliable, we're involved. We want to be part of the solution. And so like Judi says, it is, even though that they've been, I guess, preoccupied appears to be the best word, we continue to do our part in saying we're here, we have something to offer Albertans, and we're prepared to do that. And I think that recent letter that psychologists were able to provide to the public and those kinds of things suggest that they are listening.
Excellent, thank you. And just to wrap up this town hall, one last question that came up was if there was any word on second vaccines, specifically for health providers, specifically for psychologists. And I don't know if you're in your conversation with Dr. Henshaw, if you got a word on that, Richard.
Yes, yeah, I do, Troy. Thank you. That's a very good question. And so the next rollout of second doses will be in the same order as it was previously. So those who will be in the I believe it was 2C phase last time, will be in that same phase for second doses. So we will be prioritized with other healthcare workers for that second dose. So I'm anticipating that many of us will receive our second dose in June, if not July. So yes, we are going to be prioritized in the similar order that was done for the first dose.
And if there's any sort of that top of mind questions that arise, similar advocacy to the first round. We're not saying psychologists get to the front of the queue, or that we think, and many groups have done that. We have said, A, let's be clear, we're healthcare providers, so that consideration is made. And B, we want to align with the most vulnerable populations. If you work with a particularly vulnerable population, you should probably be further up the queue than others. So it's not psychologists, it's A, we're healthcare providers, and B, what kind of healthcare providing are we doing? What settings are we working in? How vulnerable are the people that we serve? And that really has also gone over really well and been very respected by many of the groups that I certainly have interactions with and advocate or speak with.
And I think as well, Judi and Troy, that goes back to when there was a question about whether or not psychologists were essential health service providers. We took action and engaged with the province, and we engaged with legal support. When there was a question about whether or not, yes, you are, but maybe you aren't, or those kinds of things, we took the position that we are healthcare workers, we are an essential service, and had our legal counsel write the government, and they got back to us very quickly and said you are essential healthcare service, and that's reflected in our vaccination priority.
Excellent. Well, I think that comes to the conclusion of this town hall in terms of the questions and answers that came up on the comment sections. I think that this town hall, to me, has a much different sort of feel to it, in the sense that, last town hall in November, we were right at smack dab in the middle of this, but now there seems to be more hope. We're at the end. We're seeing the numbers coming down. We're seeing announcements of possible easing of restrictions. I know we're all excited to see some of those changes come forward. I know this has been a tremendously stressful time for both public and our profession, and there's been a tremendous burden on our professionals who have stepped up, and we've heard a lot of stories about how busy practitioners have been over this course of the pandemic. And we think that we all need to be kind and supportive and compassionate to one another in light of those circumstances. And I just want to thank all of those who participated today and were watching. And I'll let some concluding remarks from both Judi and Richard, and then we'll close off.
Judi, would you like to go?
The unwritten rule is if you're unmuted, you go first, Richard.
All right. Well, I would just like to say thank you, Troy, for moderating, and thank you for Simon for providing the technological background knowledge. And I do believe that Troy is correct, that it's important that through these times, kindness and patience are still key factors. But I would also say kindness to ourselves. We know that many practitioners have been under a tremendous amount of stress. Many are doing a double duty by parenting at home and homeschooling, and also practicing. And again, my concluding remarks are that I have been personally very impressed with how the profession has responded. And I think it's given me great pride to go to my meetings amongst other regulated health professions, and to be able to say that, our membership, almost 90% were able to, or over 90% were able to pivot to virtual care in very short order. And it does us very proud. And I think that we should recognize that and give ourselves a pat on the back.
Probably two closing thoughts that come to mind for me, because both Richard and I have quite a few roles nationally or in North America. Actually, in Alberta, we've done remarkable things, and we've been leaders, and people ask us as role models, etc., because we don't tend to follow. We tend to say what's happening here and in our province, and because of you, because of psychologists in this province that demand more or better or different, or what can we be doing and what should we be doing. So there is really a pride point for all of us in knowing that we have this kind of leadership in this province that's willing to stand up and make this kind of change in advance when we're all pivoting and figuring things out together. And on that note, I really do think self-care is so important to us. And so many of the psychologists that I've had the privilege to get to know over the years really will put other people's needs before their own, professionally anyway. And given how hard this was, and what an incredible psychological stressor for the entire populace, us included, all of this has been, it's okay to really engage in self-care and be appreciated and appreciate yourself, and we appreciate you. So do enjoy. I snuck a peek before the meeting. The weather is actually beautiful everywhere in the province. And for me, that's always very therapeutic when spring comes and starts to get really warm.
Great, thanks. And so Simon, we'll ask you to close it off. And if anyone had a question that wasn't answered, please be willing to submit that by email to either PAA or CAP, and we'd be glad to answer that in future town halls. Thanks so much, and so long.
Thanks for joining us.